The day I called my son, the world I had built around him quietly collapsed. I just wanted to ask a simple question. When is the wedding, Max? But before he could answer, I heard another voice behind him. A voice sweet as honey and sharp as a knife. Lena. She looked at me, smiling that perfect little smile of hers, and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Those words didn't shout. They didn't need to. They froze the air in my lungs. Only special people. I stood there in the middle of my living room, holding the phone that suddenly felt heavier than my own body. For 3 long years I had been paying their rent, $500 every month. I had bought every single chair in their house, filled their fridge when they had nothing to eat, and covered every little emergency they couldn't handle. And now, after all of that, I wasn't special. Lena crossed her legs on my sofa, the one I had bought for them last spring. Max couldn't even look me in the eye. I could see his guilt dripping like sweat. But he said nothing. Not a single word. In the corner of my bedroom hung a pale pink dress. I had chosen it carefully for the wedding, something elegant but modest. I had imagined myself standing in the photos next to my son, smiling, proud. That dress cost me $200, but it wasn't about money. It was about belonging, about love, about family. Now it just hung there like a foolish dream. All my plans, gone. The little savings I had set aside to give them $1,000 gift, the phone call I'd made to my sister Diana to share the good news, the cake I ordered for their reception. All of it meant nothing. Lena had drawn an invisible line, and on her side were special people. On mine, silence. "Mom," Max finally said, in a flat, rehearsed tone. It was just a small thing, very private, just us and the witnesses. But he lied. He always lied softly, like someone afraid of breaking glass, because later that night, I saw the photos. Lena's parents smiling beside them, her siblings raising glasses of champagne, her white dress glimmering in the sun, a dress I had helped pay for when I sent her $800 last month for personal expenses. I saw everything, and I saw myself missing from all of it. A week later, 7 days exactly, the phone rang again. It was Lena, but her voice was different now. Gone was that cold, triumphant tone. What came instead was sugar mixed with panic. "Renate, the rent is overdue. The landlord says we'll be kicked out if we don't pay this week. You forgot to make the transfer." Forgot. The word stung like a slap. I hadn't forgotten. I had stopped. For a moment, I said nothing. I just listened to her voice tremble. And in that tremor, I heard years of my own foolishness echoing back. All those times I rushed to the bank before closing time. All the days I skipped my own meals to make sure they had enough. Finally, I said, very softly, "Lena, didn't I tell you? I only help special people." Silence. The kind that fills every corner of a house. I could almost hear her blinking on the other end. "Renate, I don't understand," she stammered. "You've always said we're special to you. You're like a second mother to me." A second mother. What a convenient phrase. The kind you use when you need money, not when you want love. I could almost see her face. Eyes wide, pretending to be hurt, lips trembling just enough to sound sincere. But I was done. That night I sat on my bed and cried. Not the weak, hopeless tears of someone begging to be loved, but the tears of a woman who finally realizes she's been living in a lie. For 3 years, I had carried their lives on my shoulders. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, I had spent more than $20,000. $20,000 taken from my savings, from my husband's inheritance, from the little piece I was supposed to have in my old age. And what did I get? A wedding I wasn't invited to. Those words, only special people, became a poison that burned through every memory. I saw every Christmas, every birthday, every meal we had shared, and behind each one was the same pattern: me giving, them taking. I cried for the woman who believed love had to be bought, for the mother who thought generosity would earn affection, for the fool who mistook dependency for closeness. When morning came, something inside me was different. The pain was still there, yes, but it had changed shape. It had become hard, solid, cold. I looked in the mirror and saw the same tired eyes, the same wrinkles, the same grey hair. But behind them there was something new, a flicker of clarity, of strength. I brewed coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and took out my old checkbook. For years, this table had been a place of giving, of planning how to help them, how to stretch my money for their needs. Now it would become the place where I ended it all. I began to write numbers. 500 for rent, every month for 3 years, 18,000. 200 monthly for food and supplies, another 7,200. Gifts, birthdays, Christmas, at least 3,000. Medical emergencies, car repairs, furniture, more still. Altogether, over $33,000. 33,000. That was the price of my illusion. I looked at that number and whispered, never again. The phone rang once, twice. I didn't move. For the first time in years, I let it ring until it stopped. That morning, as sunlight filled my kitchen, I realized something simple and powerful. I didn't need to be special to anyone. I just needed to be free. The next morning felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, not yet, but quiet in a way that made every tick of the clock sound like a heartbeat. I poured myself coffee and stared at the steam rising from the cup. For 40 years, I had started every day like this. 1 cup, 2 sugars, a glance at the phone to see if Max needed anything. That morning, I didn't look. I didn't want to. For once, my first thought of the day wasn't about him. It was about me. I sat at that kitchen table, the same one where I had counted bills and planned birthdays, and realized how much of my life I had built around their needs. Every purchase, every sacrifice, every act of love, all of it was a rope tightening around my neck, disguised as devotion. I had to cut it. So I dressed neatly, combed my hair, and walked to the bank. The air outside felt heavy, but it was a kind of heaviness that comes before a storm. Electric, expectant, full of promise. When I entered the bank, Mr. Klein, the branch manager, looked up and smiled. He had known me for years, seen me come in every month to transfer money to Max and Lena. "Good morning, Mrs. Richter," he said. "The usual transfer?" "No," I answered. "Quite the opposite. I want to cancel them." He blinked, surprised. "All of them?" "All of them." He hesitated. "Is something wrong? Did something happen?" For the first time in a long time, someone's concern felt real. Not because they needed something, but because they cared, even if just a little. "What happened," I said quietly, "is that I finally opened my eyes." As he typed on his computer, my phone began to buzz. First Max, then Lena, then Max again. It was as if they could feel the lifeline slipping away. "Do you want me to block their access to your accounts as well?" Mr. Klein asked gently. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Completely. I don't want them near my money, not even by accident." He nodded and printed a few documents. "You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Richter. Sometimes being kind means knowing when to stop giving." His words pierced through me like sunlight through clouds. Simple. True. By the time I left the bank, the buzzing phone in my purse felt like an annoying insect. I didn't even check the screen. I turned it off, walked out into the crisp morning air, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But it was the faint shadow of freedom. When I got home, 3 cars were parked outside. Max's, Lena's, and one I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. They had keys. Of course they did. I'd given them keys because I trusted them, because I believed they would one day care for me the way I had cared for them. I opened the door and froze. They were already inside. Max sat on my sofa, elbows on his knees, head buried in his hands. Lena was pacing like a caged cat. And the stranger, a man in a grey suit, was flipping through papers on my dining table. My papers. "What is happening here?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart hammered in my chest. They all turned toward me as if I were the intruder. Lena spoke first. "Renate, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher. He's a family attorney. We just want to make sure you're okay." "My situation?" I repeated. "I'm perfectly fine." Max lifted his head, his voice rehearsed and patronizing. "Mum, you've been acting strangely, cutting off communication, cancelling transfers, blocking accounts. We're worried about you." The lawyer smiled the kind of smile that makes your skin crawl. "Mrs. Richter, your children are concerned for your mental health. They've asked me to evaluate your condition and help protect your assets." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I picked up every paper he had touched and stacked them neatly back into my folder. "These," I said, "are private documents. You have no right to look at them." "Mom," Max interrupted, "please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to help you." "Help me?" I said, laughing without humor. "By breaking into my house? By bringing a lawyer?" Lena stepped forward and touched my arm, her voice syrupy sweet. "Renate, honey, we know this is hard, but maybe you're overwhelmed. At your age, confusion is normal." That word, confusion, hit like a thunderclap. Now I understood. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take control. "To be clear," I said slowly, "you think I'm mentally unfit to manage my own life?" Mr. Fisher nodded politely. "We've noticed behaviors that suggest concern." "Such as?" He hesitated. I didn't. "You mean the behavior of deciding my money is mine? Of refusing to finance 2 adults who treat me like a stranger?" Lena's mask slipped. "We never treated you badly. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process." And there it was. The truth. Naked and ugly. They weren't worried. They were planning their inheritance in advance. "Out," I said, pointing to the door. "Mum, we can't just leave," Max snapped. "We have obligations, the rent, the car, the credit cards you co-signed." "I can't." I cut him off, my voice suddenly sharp as glass. "Watch me." Mr. Fisher slid a folder toward me. "This is a temporary power of attorney. It will allow your son to manage your finances while you recover." Without opening it, I threw it straight into the trash. "The only thing I'm recovering from," I said coldly, "is my blindness." Lena started to cry, though not a single tear reached her eyes. "You can't do this to us, Renate. We were counting on you." "Exactly," I said. "Counting on me. Counting my money. Counting my silence." Max stood up, his voice rising. "This will end badly for you. You'll end up alone, with no one to take care of you." I looked him dead in the eye. "I'm already alone, Max. The difference is, This time it's by choice. When the door finally slammed behind them, the house fell into a silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. It wasn't the silence of abandonment anymore. It was the silence of peace. That night, I couldn't sleep. But for the first time, it wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was adrenaline. Freedom. I lay in bed, planning my next steps. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. But this time, it wouldn't be with tears or begging. It would be with strategy. At dawn, I dressed, combed my hair, and stepped out into the cool morning light. Not as a victim, but as a woman finally ready to reclaim her life. The morning air felt sharper than usual, like the world itself had been washed clean overnight. For years I had walked through life half asleep, drowning in obligations that weren't mine. Now, every step I took was deliberate. Every breath, mine alone. My first destination was the small law office on Birch Street. The brass letters on the door read, Weber and Associates. I remembered Mr. Weber well. He had handled my late husband's will 2 decades earlier. A calm man, precise with words, the kind who never wasted breath. He looked up from his desk as I entered, surprise flickering in his eyes. Mrs. Richter, he said warmly, standing. It's been a long time. How can I help you? I sat down, folded my hands, and told him everything. The secret wedding, the invasion of my house, the lawyer, the threat to declare me incompetent. For a long while, he didn't interrupt. He just listened, his brow tightening, his pen tapping softly on the desk. When I finished, he let out a quiet sigh. Mrs. Richter, he said, what your son and daughter-in-law are doing has a name. It's called elder financial abuse. It's not only immoral, it's a crime. His words both comforted and terrified me. Comforted because I was not crazy. Terrified because the situation was even darker than I had imagined. We'll take action immediately, he continued. First, we'll document everything. Every transfer, every gift, every expense. Then, we'll secure your assets and file a report to protect you legally. And one more thing. We'll change your will. No one should inherit a cent who has tried to destroy you. I nodded. Do whatever is necessary. For the next 3 hours, we went through my finances line by line. Rent payments, bank statements, credit transfers, even grocery receipts. When he saw the total, $33,400, he whistled softly. Mrs. Richter, with this amount, you could have lived comfortably. You could have traveled, seen the world. Instead, you financed the lives of 2 grown adults who didn't even invite you to their wedding. His words stung, but they were true. When I left his office, I had a plan, a real one. Step 1, change the locks. Step 2, install a security system. Step 3, open a new account at a different bank. Step 4, start living again. I walked straight to the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, looked up from behind the counter. Mrs. Richter, he said cheerfully. Another repair for Max and Lena? For the first time, I smiled. No, Mr. Summer. This time it's for me. I need new locks. The best you've got. He blinked, surprised, but didn't ask questions. Of course, he said, and began to pack them. While we talked, his son Ethan, a young man with kind eyes, came in carrying some tools. Ethan, his father said, this is Mrs. Richter. She needs new locks installed. Ethan nodded. I can do that tomorrow morning. Anything else, Mom? Yes, I said after a moment's thought. I need a full security system. Cameras, alarms, everything. He smiled faintly. I can handle that too. As they prepared the order, my phone began to buzz again. An unfamiliar number this time. Against my better judgment, I answered. Renate, came Lena's voice. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. Go ahead, I said flatly. I know you're angry about the wedding, she began, her tone dripping with fake softness. It was a mistake. Max and I talked about it. We want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner? Just the three of us? We'll cook together, like we used to. Her manipulation was so transparent that I almost laughed. Lena, I said, how much rent do you owe? Silence. 2 months, she muttered finally. 1,000 total. But that's not why I'm calling. Oh, I think it is, I interrupted. You miss my money, not me. That's not true, she said quickly. We love you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I asked, why wasn't I important enough to be invited to your wedding, or to get a phone call that wasn't about money? The line went dead quiet. We both knew the answer. Lena, I said calmly, for 3 years you've treated me like an ATM with feelings. You've used me, lied to me, humiliated me. And now, when the money's gone, suddenly I'm family again. Renate, please. There is no please. I cut her off. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be part of your life. Now I'm making mine. And I hung up. It felt good. Not sweet, not triumphant, just clean. Like scrubbing dirt off a wound. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I went to the beauty salon. Cynthia, my old hairdresser, nearly dropped her comb when she saw me. Mrs. Richter, I thought you'd forgotten about us. I didn't forget, I said with a small smile. I just forgot myself. I asked for the full treatment, haircut, colour, manicure, pedicure. As she worked, she told me stories about her children, her garden, her dreams. It was refreshing, a conversation that didn't revolve around emergencies or money. When she finished, she looked at me with a grin. You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Cynthia, I said. Something very good. I finally learned to say no. When I stepped out of the salon, the sky had turned golden. The world looked brighter, lighter, alive. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a background character in someone else's story. I was back in my own. When I got home, a woman was sitting on the steps of my porch, holding a mug of coffee. She was older, maybe my age, with kind eyes. Mrs. Richter? She asked. I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've never really talked, but yesterday I heard shouting at your house. I wanted to make sure you're okay. Her concern felt genuine, a rare thing. Come in, Mrs. Brooks, I said. I'll tell you a story you won't believe. We sat together at my kitchen table as I told her everything, from the wedding to the confrontation to the phone call. She listened in silence, her face soft and knowing. When I finished, she wiped a tear from her cheek. Mrs. Richter, she said, you did the right thing. I went through the same with my daughter 5 years ago. I thought I had to keep giving or she'd stop loving me. But love that depends on money isn't love at all. Her words wrapped around me like a blanket. Do you think they'll ever understand? I asked quietly. Maybe, she said. But even if they don't, it's not your burden anymore. Your only responsibility now is to yourself. That night, for the first time in years, I went to bed thinking not about rent or bills or anyone else's needs, but about myself. And I slept better than I had in a very, very long time. At first light, a small pickup rolled to the curb, and 2 men stepped out with tool bags and quiet competence. Ethan lifted a hand in greeting, and the morning felt steadier just because he was there. We walked the perimeter of the house together. He pointed to eaves and corners, to sight lines and blind spots. I nodded. I wanted eyes where mine could not reach. I wanted proof when the past tried to knock on my door and pretend to be my future. He replaced the locks first. The old brass cylinders sighed out of the doors like bad memories. New deadbolts slid into place with a calm, final click. He showed me how each one worked, how to set the alarm, how to check the feed, how to speak through the small intercom if anyone rang. His instructions were simple. My relief was not. It rose warm as tea, slow as sunrise. Inside, he mounted a small console on the wall by the hall table. A soft chime, a little green light. The house took a breath with me. "You will get alerts on your phone," he said gently. "Only if someone lingers. Only if someone tries a handle. If you ever feel unsure, call the police and let the system do the rest." I thanked him, and meant it. Mr. Summer arrived a little later to check the final screws and wish me well. He smelled faintly of sawdust and honest work. When they left, the house sounded different. Not silent. Safe. I made oatmeal. I cut a peach. I sat at the table and tasted the subtle sweetness of being left alone. The phone, face down, hummed now and then against the wood. I did not turn it over. I had learned a small discipline. Whatever it demanded could wait until I decided to answer. Maybe never. By late morning, I drove to a second bank across town and opened a clean account with a calm young teller who wore a pin shaped like a tiny lighthouse. I liked that. I moved what I needed, set new passwords, scribbled the sequence in a notebook only I would see. When she asked if there was anything else, I said yes. There was. "Please put a note on my profile," I told her, "that any requests by relatives must be verified by me in person." She did, and the lighthouse on her lapel seemed to glow a little brighter. On the way home, I took the long road that skirts the cemetery. The gates stood open. The sky above them was white and vast, like a tablecloth laid for a feast. I turned in without thinking. It had been too long. I found the familiar stone by instinct, more than memory. I knelt and traced my fingers over his name. Robert. I told him the truth. All of it. The kind of truth I used to polish before I spoke it out loud. "I lost myself," I said softly. "After you left, I poured everything into our boy. I thought devotion could build a bridge over grief. But I built a dock, and I kept tying my boat to other people's storms. A breeze moved through the trees. I told him I was learning. I told him I had changed the locks. I told him there were cameras now, and a lawyer with a spine, and a neighbor with warm hands and clear eyes. I told him that love, the real kind, had come back to sit quietly beside me. No bargains, no invoices. When I stood, my knees cracked in protest, but my back felt straight. The street was waiting when I returned, and so were the cars. Max's little coupe, Lena's compact, a black sedan I did not recognize. They were parked not quite neatly, as if each driver had tried to occupy more space than the curb could offer. Through the narrow glass of the front window, I saw movement, shadows, arms. I did not go in. I stayed in the car and called Mr. Weber. "Do not approach," he said. "I am on my way. I will notify the police. We will let the paper trail speak." So I stayed. The air conditioning hummed. The cameras watched. Max stepped onto my porch and pressed the bell, then the bell again, fast and childish. Lena's fingers sliced the air as she lectured someone I could not see. The black sedan's driver leaned on my fence and inspected his nails like a man certain the day would end his way. 2 patrol cars arrived, lights turning quietly, no sirens. Mr. Weber pulled up right behind them and walked toward the porch with the calm of a man who has seen maps of this territory and knows where the cliffs end. An officer spoke. Another took notes. Max gestured in outrage. Lena cried like a faucet turned half open. The driver rolled his eyes. I watched, steady, unblinking. One of the officers came to my window and asked me to step out. "You are safe," he said. "Please wait by your car." I did. The summer air carried cut grass and rubber and old, sun-warmed paint. The officer returned to the porch. Mr. Weber lifted a folder. He showed papers, affidavits, notices, a letter requesting that all contact go through counsel. The officer turned back to me. "Ma'am," he said kindly, "they will have to leave now. If they return without notice, we will escalate. You have every right to set boundaries." Max shouted from the sidewalk. "This is insane, Mum. We are your family." I looked at him and felt the persistent ache of love that cannot find purchase. "Family does not break into a house," I said evenly. "Family does not threaten guardianship because a wallet closed." Lena's voice cut across the heat. "You owe us. You co-signed. You promised." "I promised nothing," I answered. I rescued. I rescued until I forgot how to swim." They went. Not with remorse, not with understanding, but with the brittle anger of people who believe they are losing a game that was theirs by birthright. The black sedan idled longer than it needed to, then rolled away with a sulky purr. The street exhaled. Mr. Weber handed me a thin card with a case number and the officer's name. "Document everything," he said. "Times, dates, messages, sightings. The pattern matters." "It feels cruel," I admitted. "It is not cruelty," he replied. "It is clarity, written down." That evening, Eleanor knocked with a casserole that smelled like childhood Sundays. She did not ask if I wanted company. She simply came in, set 2 plates, and poured iced tea into glasses that sweated in the warm kitchen light. We ate slowly, and we laughed a little. And we did not talk about tragedy as if it were the only song the world knew. Later, we sat on the porch. The world dimmed to blue. A bat stitched the air above the maple tree with tiny, essential errands. Somewhere, a radio played a love song that did not lie. "Do you ever feel guilty?" I asked her. "Every now and then," she said. "But I treat guilt like weather. I wait. It passes. What remains is the climate I choose." After she left, the house felt content, like a good book closed gently after the right sentence. I showered, put on a soft nightgown, and slid between sheets that smelled faintly of lavender. Sleep came late but clean. No nightmares, just a slow drift, like a boat that finally trusts the lake. Morning brought the doorbell, a crisp, official ring. On the console, a small square lit up. The camera framed a young woman in a neat blouse holding a leather folder. Her smile was professional and apologetic at the same time. I pressed the intercom. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear through the small speaker. "I am Mrs. Schmidt with Senior Services. We received a report of possible risk and need to conduct a wellness check." A wellness check. Of course. When manipulation fails in a living room, it will always try the front door with a badge. I breathed once. Twice. The old me would have panicked, would have flung the door wide and spilled her entire heart onto the welcome mat. The new me called my lawyer. "Put her in the living room," Mr. Weber said. "Offer water. Say little. I will be there as fast as a careful driver can be." I opened the door. "Please come in," I said. "You may sit there. Would you like some water?" Thank you, she answered, taking the glass with both hands, like a person who understands politeness is a language, not a costume. She explained the report in neutral phrases: sudden financial changes, isolation, paranoia, refusal of medical assistance. Each word was a bead on a string I recognized. I could almost hear Lena counting them as she threaded. I would prefer to wait for my attorney, I said calmly. He is on his way. This is not an interrogation, she replied softly. It is only a welfare visit. And my welfare, I said, is best served with counsel present. The minutes stretched, but not like old elastic about to snap. More like sunlight across a carpet, announcing the hour by gentle inches. Mr. Weber arrived. He checked the badge and the letter. He asked reasonable questions in a steady voice. When she referenced concerned family members, he referenced documented abuse. When she hinted at confusion, he pointed to my accounts, my bills, my calendar with neat handwriting and lunch dates underlined in blue. She listened. She did not argue. She noted things and asked if I lived independently, if I managed my medication, if I had regular social contacts. I answered truthfully. Yes, yes, yes. I showed her the tidy pill organizer with vitamins and aspirin tucked like coins into each morning square. I showed her the garden gloves by the back door and the paint on my fingernail from yesterday's experiment with a daisy. She smiled once, small and genuine, at the daisy. When she stood to leave, her voice had softened. Mrs. Richter, based on what I see, you are not at risk. I will close the file. Thank you, I said. And I meant that too. Not because she granted me permission to be competent, but because the truth still had a place to stand. After the door clicked shut, Mr. Weber stayed a moment longer. He looked at the console, at the neat stack of folders on the credenza, at the way the light fell on the carpet, making a clear square like a promise. They will escalate, he said. People who live off a river panic when the source is dammed. Let them panic, I answered, surprising myself with the steel in it. I am done drowning. He nodded. There may be a petition. They may try for guardianship. We will be ready. In the meantime, do the most radical thing. What is that? Live. So I did. Not perfectly, not bravely every hour, but steadily. I called Diana and heard her laugh fill the miles like wind in a sail. I watered the tomatoes and watched an orange blossom decide to become fruit. I read a small poem aloud to an empty room and felt it answer. I bought a dress the color of late peaches and hung it on my closet door, not for anyone's ceremony, but for a dinner I planned to have with myself on Friday. And that night, when the street fell quiet and the cameras blinked green and the summer air pressed its warm palm against the windows, I wrote 3 sentences on a small card and taped it inside the hall closet where only I would see. I owe no one an apology for protecting my peace. I am not a wallet with a heartbeat. I will not buy love again. I slept under those vows like under a new roof, the kind that does not leak when the rain begins. In the morning, a letter slid through the mail slot and landed on the welcome mat with a soft, official thud. The return address was the courthouse. The envelope felt heavier than paper. I held it for a long breath, then another. The house was very quiet. The cameras watched, the locks held. My heartbeat was steady. I broke the seal. The letter trembled in my hands, even though my grip was steady. A courthouse seal stared up at me, printed in severe black ink. It was the same seal I had seen years ago on my husband's will. A symbol of justice, yes, but also of finality. Inside, a single sheet, clean type, precise language. My son and his wife had filed a petition to declare me mentally incompetent. For a moment, the words blurred. Then the room tilted, and everything in me went quiet. Not fear. Not quite. Something colder. Something that comes when betrayal stops surprising you. I called Mr. Webber. He answered on the first ring. "They've filed it," I said. "I know," he replied. "The notice reached me too. They're claiming erratic behavior and financial instability. Don't panic. We'll handle this." He came over that afternoon with a briefcase full of calm. He spread the documents on my dining table, the same table where I'd once wrapped birthday gifts for Max. "They have 3 witnesses," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Lena, of course. A neighbour, Mr. Davis, and someone claiming to be your pharmacist, a Mr. Green." I felt my jaw tighten. Mr. Green. He's a kind man. I've known him for years. "Then he may have been misled," Webber said. "We'll find out." We drove to the pharmacy. The fluorescent lights hummed above us. When Mr. Green saw me, he looked both relieved and nervous. "Mrs. Richter, how are you?" "I'm fine," I said. "But apparently I'm also insane. Did you sign something for Lena?" He flushed. "She came in last month. Said she was worried about you. Asked about your medications. I told her you only buy vitamins and aspirin, that you're in great health. But she insisted that this showed you weren't taking proper care of yourself. Then she handed me a form. I thought it was for insurance." "It wasn't," Mr. Webber said gently. "It was for court." Mr. Green's face fell. "Oh my God. Mrs. Richter, I'm so sorry." "Then help me," I said. "Write a statement explaining exactly what happened." He nodded, already reaching for a pen. From there, we went to Mr. Davis, the neighbour across the street, a man who had always looked at me like I was an inconvenience. He opened the door halfway, suspicion dripping from his eyes. "What do you want?" Mr. Webber spoke first. "We're here about the declaration you signed concerning my client's behaviour." "I stand by it," Davis snapped. "She's been acting strange, cameras everywhere, talking to herself in the yard, yelling at her family in the street." I met his gaze. "Mr. Davis, do you know why I installed cameras? Because my family broke into my home. Do you know why I yelled? Because they threatened to take my life savings. If that makes me crazy, then sanity is overrated." He crossed his arms. "You see? That's exactly the attitude I'm talking about." There was no point arguing. Lies, once set in motion, prefer their own momentum. Back at my house, Mr. Weber gathered the signed correction from Mr. Green and sat across from me. "Renate, we'll need an independent psychiatric evaluation," he said. "A professional who can officially confirm your mental capacity." "Fine," I said. "Let's do it. I have someone in mind, Dr. Moore. She's known for her integrity. No theatrics, just facts." 2 days later, I sat in Dr. Moore's office. A warm room, sunlight slanting through half-drawn blinds. She smiled, not the condescending smile of someone about to test you, but the calm smile of a person who's seen the world and learned to listen. "I'll ask you a series of questions," she said. "Take your time." For 2 hours we talked. Memory tests, arithmetic, emotional scenarios, logical puzzles. She asked me about my finances, my routine, my goals. I answered each question clearly, without rush, without fear. When we finished, she closed her folder. "Mrs. Richter," she said, "your cognitive performance is well above average for your age. You're mentally sharp, emotionally stable, and perfectly capable of managing your affairs. There's no sign of decline whatsoever." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. But the relief didn't last long, because truth is not always enough when greed wants to win. That evening, Eleanor invited me over. Her small living room glowed with warm lamps and laughter. 3 of her friends were there. women my age, each with a story etched into her face. "This is Maria," Eleanor said, "and this is Carmen and Alfreda." I shook their hands, one by one. "Eleanor says you've all been through something similar." "Oh, honey," Maria said, shaking her head. "Every one of us has been called crazy by someone who wanted our money." They told me their stories. A daughter who forged a will, a nephew who drained an account, a grandson who threatened guardianship. Every tale sounded like an echo of mine, played in different keys. "What did you do?" I asked. Carmen smiled, thin but proud. "We fought, and we won. But it's never really about the court, is it? It's about reclaiming yourself." I looked around the room. These women weren't broken. They were tempered, steel forged in the fires of betrayal. "Will you testify for me if it comes to that?" I asked quietly. Eleanor nodded before I even finished the sentence. "Every one of us will." That night, back home, I sat by the window and watched the stars blink above the dark rooftops. Somewhere out there, Max and Lena were preparing their next move, convinced that paperwork could erase my will, that signatures could rewrite who I was. I pressed my palm against the cold glass and whispered to the night, "You raised a fighter, Robert, and she's still here." The next morning, Mr. Weber called. "They've escalated," he said grimly. "A full court hearing, 2 weeks from now." 2 weeks. 14 days to prove that sanity can't be stolen, that love doesn't excuse cruelty, that I was not just someone's mother. I was a woman with rights, with clarity, with a voice. And for the first time, I was ready to use it. On the morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn and sat in the pale light with my hands around a warm cup. Steam gathered like ghosts and disappeared one breath at a time. I dressed in a simple black suit, the fabric smooth beneath my palms, and fastened the small silver brooch Robert once said made me look like I carried a star. I stood in the mirror and practiced the quiet art of breathing. In, out, not a victim, a witness to my own life. Mr. Weber arrived just after the hour when traffic hums like a distant sea. He reviewed our plan one last time at my kitchen table, the table that had seen birthdays and budgets, and lately only truth. "Remember," he said softly, "the burden is on them. They must prove you cannot decide for yourself. You must only be yourself." We walked into the courthouse as the city yawned awake. The hallways smelled faintly of paper and coffee. Marble floors carried the small chorus of a busy morning. Shoes, quiet voices, a bailiff's polite command. Outside the courtroom, I saw Max in a new suit that did not know his shape yet, and Lena in solemn black as if she were attending a funeral. Perhaps she was. Perhaps something sacred in our family had already been buried, and we were here to read the last words over it. Their attorney was an older man with a polished voice and a smile taught to persuade. When the judge entered, we rose. His presence was steady, neither stern nor soft, the air of a person who had listened to many lives and measured each without haste. The petitioners spoke first. Their attorney stood with measured grace. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here because a loving family has watched, with growing concern, a woman they cherish become confused and vulnerable. Abrupt financial decisions, social isolation, paranoid security measures, refusal of medical guidance. They ask only to ensure her safety." Each word had been combed and scented, free of burrs that might catch the ear. It made exploitation sound like duty. It made control sound like care. He called Lena. She walked to the stand with her eyes already shining. The oath sounded small in the space around her, as if the words themselves were uncertain where to land. Renate has always been like a second mother to me, she said, voice trembling in the practiced way of certain actresses and certain liars. But over the past months, her behavior has changed. She shut us out. She cancelled the transfers that kept her household stable. She installed cameras. She accused us of terrible things. We begged her to see a doctor. Did you exclude her from your wedding? Mr. Weber asked when his turn came, the question plain as a stone. It was a very small ceremony, Lena replied, chin lifting. Did you, or did you not, tell her you invited only special people? It was taken out of context. What context redeems it? Silence does not always mean defeat. Sometimes it simply means the truth has entered the room and would like a chair. Max took the stand next. He did not look at me as he raised his hand. He spoke of kindness and worry, of a devoted son who had tried everything. He reclaimed words like rescue and support as if they belonged to him. He said family. He said duty. He said love. Mr. Weber's questions were careful needles threading a simple quilt. How many times in the last 3 years did you visit your mother without asking for money? I do not recall. Would you agree the amount you received from her during those years is in the range of 30,000 or more? She has always been generous. Did you bring a lawyer to her house and present a power of attorney for her signature without her counsel present? We were concerned about her ability to manage. Did you attempt to search her personal documents without permission? We were looking for evidence of confusion. Words rearranged their furniture, but the room stayed the same. They called Mr. Davis, the neighbor who loved the sound of his own certainty. He described my cameras like landmines and my new friends like invaders. She argues in the street, he said. She talks to herself in the yard. He squinted toward me. She is not the woman she was. Mr. Weber asked if he had ever spoken to me directly. He had not. Asked whether he knew my son had entered my home without permission. He did not. Whether he knew why the cameras were installed. He did not. Ignorance stood there, dressed like authority, and waited for applause that did not come. They called Dr. Lehman, a psychiatrist who had never met me. He sat with the unearned comfort of a man who favors theories over people. He spoke about refusal as an index of decline. He said that resistance to evaluation often indicated paranoia. He said many things in a tone that lowered itself to be believed. When he stepped down, the air felt thinner. It is one thing to be wounded by family. It is another to hear a stranger, paid handsomely, pronounce a verdict over a life he has not bothered to enter. Then it was our turn. Mr. Weber rose without flourish. He did not clear his throat or smooth his tie. He simply called Mr. Green. The pharmacist's hands shook slightly as he took the oath. I have known Mrs. Richter for many years, he said. Her daughter-in-law came to me asking about her medications. I told her the truth. Vitamins and occasional aspirin, nothing more. She asked me to sign a paper, saying it was for insurance. I did not read it closely, and I regret that. I want the record to reflect that I have never observed erratic behavior in Mrs. Richter. She is clear, organized, and kind. Next came Mr. Summer from the hardware store, sun-browned and plain-spoken, followed by Ethan with the quiet backbone of a good man raised right. They testified to practical things, dates of installation, reasons for locks and cameras, the normal competence with which I made decisions and asked questions. Practicality can be a kind of poetry when survival is the theme. Eleanor took the stand and carried the room the way lamps carry winter. She spoke not in dramatic flourishes, but in human sentences. Dinners shared, gardens tended, the sound of 2 women laughing at the end of a hard day. She is not isolated, Eleanor said. She is building a life. The difference is that now she chooses who enters it. Dr. Moore followed. She carried no performance. She had no need. She explained the assessment with steady hands, the tests and the outcomes, the score that belonged to me like a clean bill of weather. Mrs. Richter's cognition is not merely intact, she said. It is strong. She demonstrates sound judgment, accurate memory, and clear financial reasoning. There is no clinical basis to suggest incapacity. For a moment, the courtroom felt like a room with windows. Air moved, light found corners. Then I took the stand. The oath tasted like iron and spring water. I sat, folded my hands, and met the judge's eyes. Mr. Weber asked the first question, but he did not truly need to. The story lived near my throat like a bird ready to fly. I spoke of years measured in grocery bags and rent receipts, of small holidays arranged around the emergencies of others, of love translated into wire transfers until the language forgot itself. I described the day of the phone call, the 4 small words that cracked open the long, bright lie. Only special people. I described the lawyer in my dining room, the file in my trash, the moment I understood that sometimes saying no is the most tender form of saying yes. Yes, to one's own life. Their attorney cross-examined with the practiced kindness of a man who would guide you into a trap and apologize for the flaw. Mrs. Richter, he said, do you concede that your behavior changed abruptly? Yes, I answered. Abuse ended. That can look abrupt to those who benefited from it. Would you agree that severing all support can endanger family bonds? Bonds rooted in money are not family. They are contracts signed in fear. Do you harbor resentment toward your son? I grieve him, I said. Resentment is for debts. Grief is for love. He tried to make my friends into manipulators, my lawyer into a puppeteer, my neighbor into a fantasy. He tried to make my clarity sound like coldness. But truth, once it learns to stand, stands on its own legs. It does not need a handrail. When the last witness stepped down, the judge asked for closing arguments. Their attorney spoke again of worry and guardianship, of a gentle hedge against imagined risks. Mr. Weber rose and let silence walk 2 or 3 paces before he spoke. What stands before this court, he said, is not confusion, but recovery. A woman who has spent years underwriting the comfort of others has decided to resume stewardship of her own resources. The petitioners have not presented medical proof of incapacity, only financial frustration. They are not here to protect a mind. They are here to reclaim a lifestyle funded by a mother's fear of losing love. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He placed each word down as one sets stones across a river, and by the time he finished, there was a sure path from one side to the other. The judge retired to deliberate. The door closed behind him with a gentle finality. The courtroom exhaled. People stood and stretched, whispered, checked small glowing screens. I remained seated, hands folded in my lap, staring at the empty space where truth had just performed its quiet work. Eleanor touched my shoulder, a brief, steady anchor. Mr. Weber nodded once, the kind of nod that means, "We have done what can be done." Across the aisle, Max did not meet my eyes. He stared at the floor as if a clear conscience might be found there like a coin. Lena's face had hardened into something smooth and reflective, a surface designed to send every gaze back to the one who dared to look. For a heartbeat, I wanted to walk to them, to say their names like I used to when storms frightened a child in the night. But some winds are not weather. They are the climate a person chooses. Time lengthened until it felt like a hallway without doors. I closed my eyes and saw Robert's grave beneath the leaning tree. the simple letters of his name, the good and faithful life we built out of small, honest bricks. I heard Eleanor's voice. Guilt is weather. Wait, and it will pass. I felt the rough courage of Elfrida's hand in mine when she said love cannot be bought, and if you must pay for it, it was never love. The bailiff's voice called us back to attention. The door opened. The judge returned, expression calm, papers in his hand. We stood. We sat. He looked down at the page, then up at the room, and spoke the measured syllables that carry more than sound. He began to read. The judge's voice carried through the stillness of the courtroom, low, deliberate, steady. Every syllable seemed to weigh the room down before lifting it again. I have reviewed the petition, he began. I have considered the testimony, the evidence, the expert opinions, and the demeanour of all parties involved. He paused. The sound of papers shifting was suddenly immense. What I see, he continued, is not a woman in decline, but a woman in recovery. Not confusion, but clarity. Not incapacity, but courage. The gavel came down once. The petition for guardianship is denied. Silence filled the room, thick and absolute. Then came the words that ended months of fear. Mrs. Renate Richter retains full legal and financial independence. It took a moment for the meaning to land. Then breath, sharp, trembling, left my body in a rush. Across the aisle, Lena gasped as if the air had betrayed her. Max closed his eyes, shoulders falling like sails in a wind that had finally stopped blowing their way. The lawyer scribbled something into his file that could not save the day. Mr. Webber turned toward me, his face quiet, but his eyes bright with victory. It's over, he whispered. You've won. No applause followed. No cheers. Only the faint hum of the ceiling lights and the creak of benches as people stood. Justice, when it arrives, rarely makes noise. Outside, sunlight waited, the kind that feels earned. It painted gold on the courthouse steps, on the people passing by, on the world that had kept turning, even as mine had nearly stopped. Would you like a statement for the press? Mr. Webber asked softly. No, I said. Let them talk among themselves. I've spoken enough. He smiled. Then go live. I stepped into the light. That afternoon, Eleanor met me at my gate. She didn't ask for details. She already knew. She hugged me with both arms, the kind of embrace that doesn't say congratulations, but welcome back. We sat in the garden with glasses of iced tea, the lemon slices catching sunlight like coins. So, she said, what will you do now that you're free? I looked at the lilac bush in bloom, at the bees moving from petal to petal like small, patient workers. I'm not sure, I admitted. But I know what I won't do. I won't build cages out of kindness anymore. Eleanor nodded. That's a start. The next days came quietly. I returned to simple rituals, watering plants, cooking breakfast, opening windows. Each act felt new, small freedoms adding up to something sacred. I walked to the park one morning and saw a young mother playing with her son by the fountain. She looked exhausted and happy, her laughter loud and unself-conscious. The boy's joy rippled through the air like music. I sat on a bench and let it wash over me. For the first time, the ache in my chest felt lighter, not gone, but softened. A week later, I received a letter, handwritten, the envelope thin, uncertain. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. Dear Mom, I don't know where to start. The court, the lawyer, everything went too far. I was angry, lost. Lena said it was for your safety, and I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Now I don't know what to believe. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I remember the mother who sat with me on rainy nights, who held my hand when Dad died, who gave me everything. I miss her. Love. Max. I read it twice. Then I placed it on the table beside my coffee cup. Forgiveness is a quiet animal. It doesn't come when called. But maybe, I thought, one day it might find its way back home. I didn't write back. Not yet. 2 evenings later, Lena appeared at my gate. Not dramatic this time. No raised voice, no performance. She stood there, pale, uncertain. I just wanted to say, she began, then stopped. I wanted to say I was wrong. I let greed drive me. I saw you as a wallet, not a woman. And I'm sorry. The old me might have invited her in, made tea, tried to comfort her. But this new me, this rebuilt, quietly strong version, simply nodded. I hope you learn, I said gently. Truly learn. Because there's a kind of hunger that ruins people from the inside. Don't let it eat you. She nodded, tears real this time. Goodbye, Renate. Goodbye, Lena. She left, and with her departure, a strange peace settled. Weeks passed. The garden grew wild and joyful. Birds nested in the lilac. Tomatoes ripened faster than I could pick them. I began volunteering at a local library, reading stories to children whose laughter filled every room like sunlight through lace. I caught myself smiling easily now, not because life was perfect, but because it was mine. One afternoon, as I shelved a row of books, a little girl tugged on my sleeve. Mrs. Richter, she said shyly, my grandma says you're very brave. I smiled. Maybe. But bravery is just doing the right thing, even when you're scared. She grinned. Then I want to be brave too. Her words stayed with me long after she skipped away. That night, I sat by the window, my favorite spot now, and watched the last traces of sunset melt into evening. The lights from the street flickered on one by one. Somewhere, a piano played through an open window. I whispered to the quiet room. I did it, Robert. I made it through. The house didn't answer, but I felt it. A calm that filled every corner like soft music. The next morning, I opened my diary and wrote, freedom is not given. It's reclaimed. One boundary, one breath, one brave choice at a time. Then, beneath it, I added, tomorrow, I'll plant new roses. The morning light came softly through the lace curtains, painting tiny gold threads across the floor. I had always liked this time, the pause before the world remembered to rush. The kettle sang, and I smiled. The house felt alive again, not because it was full of people, but because it was full of peace. I carried my tea to the garden. The air smelled of mint and soil, of something green being born. The lilac bush swayed gently, brushing against the fence like an old friend. I reached down, brushed the leaves, and whispered, we made it. It wasn't triumph. It was survival. Quieter, steadier, more honest. A letter from the local library sat on the porch table. They wanted me to lead a weekly reading circle for children and seniors together. Stories across generations, they called it. I laughed softly at the title. I used to think generations were bound by blood. Now I knew they could be bound by empathy instead. When I arrived at the library that afternoon, the scent of paper and dust wrapped around me like a familiar shawl. The children sat in a semicircle, restless and curious. Behind them, 3 older women and 2 men, my age, maybe older, waited with patient smiles. Today, I said, opening the first book, we'll read something about courage, not the kind with swords and flags, but the kind that happens quietly, inside the heart. Their eyes followed every word. The smallest boy leaned forward, chin on his palms. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat, then a wave of small applause, clumsy and beautiful. Afterward, one of the older men approached me. "Mrs. Richter," he said softly, "your story, is it real?" I smiled. All courage is real if it changes someone. He nodded, eyes bright, and walked away. I realized then I wasn't reading stories anymore. I was living one. In the evenings, I began walking down to the river, the same path Robert and I once took, years ago, when life was still a shared promise. The water glimmered under the sunset, its surface restless, its voice eternal. I'd sit on the bench we loved and talk to him. "I learned something, you know," I told the river. "Love doesn't vanish when it's tested. It simply changes shape. It becomes strength." Sometimes I'd imagine his laughter in the wind, low and tender, answering, "That's my girl." I no longer felt haunted by what had happened. Pain had folded itself into memory, still sharp at the edges, but not bleeding anymore. I understood now that forgiveness wasn't about excusing cruelty. It was about releasing the grip it had on my peace. One evening, a soft knock came at the door. I opened it to find Max standing there, alone. His eyes were tired, his hair unkempt, his shoulders smaller somehow. "Hi, Mum." It was the first time he'd called me that since the trial. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I stepped aside. "Come in." He looked around the living room, taking in the photos, the flowers, the calmness. "It looks the same," he murmured. "It's the same house," I said. "But not the same woman." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that." We sat at the table, the one that had seen every chapter of our lives. "I'm not here to justify anything," he began. "I was wrong. Lena's gone. We separated after the trial. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I let greed speak louder than love. I can't fix what I did, but I want to at least own it." He looked older, not in years, but in humility. There was no arrogance left, no practiced tone. Just my son, lost, ashamed, trying. "I won't pretend it didn't hurt," I said softly. "It nearly broke me. But I'm still here, Max. And I hope one day you'll forgive yourself. That's the hardest part." His eyes filled. He nodded. "Can I come by again? Not to talk about the past, just to see you?" I looked at him for a long time. The boy who used to bring me dandelions in his tiny fist, who once promised never to let me be lonely. The man who'd forgotten that promise. "Once a week," I said. "We'll start with coffee. You bring the cake." He smiled. A small, fragile thing, but real. Deal. Over the next months, he came every Sunday. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just sat in silence, sharing the same air. Healing doesn't make noise. It happens like spring, slow and stubborn. He helped me repaint the fence, fixed the squeaky hinge on the gate, replaced a broken lamp. We didn't mention court papers or betrayal. We talked about weather, music, life. Each word was a stone in a bridge that didn't have to be perfect, only strong enough to cross. One afternoon, as we finished painting, he said, "You know, Lena was right about one thing. You are special. I just forgot what that meant." I smiled faintly. I didn't. By autumn, my life had a rhythm again. Library on Tuesdays, gardening on Thursdays, coffee with Eleanor on Fridays, and on Sundays, Max, sometimes with his new rescue dog, a clumsy golden retriever that adored everyone. I no longer counted the years behind me. I counted mornings where peace arrived early and stayed late. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back had silver hair and soft lines around her eyes, but her gaze was bright, steady. For the first time in decades, I recognized her, the version of me that existed before fear, before guilt, before compromise. I missed you, I whispered to her reflection. That evening, as twilight spread across the sky, I wrote in my diary again. Freedom isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to stop apologizing for existing. Love is not ownership. It's presence. And beneath it, I added, tomorrow, I'll take that train I always postponed. Maybe Vienna. Maybe the sea. Maybe anywhere that smells like beginning again. I closed the diary, blew out the candle, and sat in the dark, smiling, unafraid. The house breathed with me. The cameras watched, silent and faithful. But for once, there was nothing to guard against. Only the gentle rhythm of a heart that had learned to belong to itself. And somewhere in the distance, as the night folded around the world, I could almost hear Robert's voice again. Soft, proud, certain. You did it, Renate. You came home. The decision came quietly, like most important things do. I woke one morning to a shaft of sunlight cutting through the curtain, and I knew it was time to leave. Not forever, just far enough to feel distance stretch and then soften. I packed a small suitcase, one dress, 2 books, a notebook, my husband's old compass that never pointed north, but somehow always found its way home. Eleanor drove me to the station. We didn't speak much. She knew what silence can say. On the platform, the air smelled of coffee and iron. Trains sighed in their sleep, ready to become motion. Write to me, she said, squeezing my hands. I will, I promised. But don't worry if it takes a while. I plan to live faster than the mail. She laughed, a clear sound that followed me as I boarded. The train shuddered, and the world began to slide sideways. The countryside rolled past in a green blur. Fields, villages, the occasional church steeple cutting into a pale sky. I pressed my forehead to the glass and watched everything that had weighed me down shrink to the size of memory. Freedom doesn't always arrive as fireworks. Sometimes it looks like a window seat and a ticket to anywhere. The rhythm of the train felt like a heartbeat, not entirely my own. I closed my eyes and imagined Robert sitting across from me, reading a newspaper he never finished, humming under his breath. He had loved trains, said they reminded him that life moves forward, whether or not we're ready. Look at you, I whispered. Still right, after all this time. The conductor passed by, and I smiled at him, realizing how strange it felt to be seen as just another traveller, not a victim, not a mother to rescue, not a name in a court file, just a woman on a journey. By evening, the train slid into Vienna. The station lights shimmered on polished floors. Voices echoed in a dozen languages. I stepped onto the platform and felt the city breathing, confident, alive. Outside, autumn had begun its slow conversation with the trees. Leaves brushed the cobblestones like whispered applause. I found a small guest house on a quiet street. The woman at the desk handed me a brass key and smiled. "Welcome home," she said out of habit. The words landed deeper than she could have guessed. That night, I stood on the balcony, looking over the roofs. Bells rang somewhere far away. I realized I wasn't lonely, only alone. And there's a difference. Loneliness is hunger. Aloneness is peace that has learned to live without permission. The next morning, I wandered without plan. Vienna felt like a song written in stone, elegant, layered, full of echoes. I walked through narrow streets, past bakeries that smelled of butter and childhood, past musicians playing for coins that sounded like gold when they hit the case. In a small cafe, I ordered coffee and apple strudel. The waiter, a young man with gentle eyes, asked if I was travelling for business or pleasure. For forgiveness, I said, before I could stop myself. He smiled as if he understood. Then you came to the right city. Here, even the buildings forgive each other for leaning too close. Days slipped by like pages turned carefully. I visited museums, sat in parks, listened to strangers' laughter. I didn't take photos. I didn't need proof. I wanted memory, not evidence. One afternoon, I met a painter by the river, an old man sketching bridges and pigeons with trembling precision. We talked about colour, about light, about what people never notice until it's gone. "Do you paint?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "You should. You have the eyes of someone who has learned to see." That night, I bought a small sketchbook. My first drawing was terrible, a crooked cup and a window too small for its frame. But it made me smile. For once, creation wasn't about perfection. It was about permission. On my 6th day, I visited a music hall. The orchestra played Brahms, and for an hour, I forgot everything. The music rose like a tide, carrying the audience together, every stranger's breath falling into rhythm. When the violins swelled, I felt tears slip down my cheeks. Not sadness, not joy, something in between. Healing, maybe. The kind that sneaks up on you in the middle of beauty. I closed my eyes and thought, this is what peace sounds like. A week later, I took a train again, this time south, toward the sea. The air grew warmer. The scent of salt reached through the window. I had never been to the coast alone before. Robert and I always promised we'd go someday. Someday had finally arrived, years late, but still mine. The water was endless, blue and wide and alive. I stood on the sand, shoes in my hand, wind in my hair, and felt the world open. "Look, Robert," I whispered. "You were right. There's life after everything." I stayed in a small seaside inn. Each morning I walked barefoot along the edge where the waves kissed the earth. I wrote in my notebook. Thoughts, dreams, fragments of what I'd lost and what I'd found. Sometimes you have to leave the place where you were broken to remember you were whole. One morning, I watched an old couple feeding gulls. Their laughter rose and fell with the tide. The woman caught my eye and waved. Her husband saluted playfully with a baguette. For the first time, I didn't feel envy watching love. I felt recognition, the quiet knowledge that I had known it once, deeply, and that was enough. When I finally boarded the train back home, I didn't feel like I was returning. I felt like I was beginning again. Eleanor met me at the station, her smile wide enough to hold the whole world. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "and a few things I didn't know I'd lost." We drove back through the familiar streets. The lilac bush waited patiently at the gate, heavy with blooms. Inside, the house smelled of sun and safety. I unpacked slowly. The compass, the sketchbook, a seashell from the shore, smooth and bright. I placed them on the table and thought, these are not souvenirs. They're proof of life. That night, I wrote one last line in my diary. The journey didn't teach me who I was. It reminded me that I never stopped being her. Then I turned off the light and let sleep come easily, carried by the rhythm of distant trains and the steady heart of a woman finally at peace. Autumn came again, quiet and golden. The leaves along my street burned softly with colour, then fell one by one like sighs that had waited all year to be released. It had been almost 3 years since the trial, though I no longer marked time by pain. The days now were measured by smaller things, the way sunlight slid across my kitchen table, the scent of wet soil after rain, the laughter of children passing on their way to school. The house no longer echoed, it breathed. The silence inside it had turned from loneliness into music, slow, tender, familiar. I sat at my desk by the window, a pot of tea beside me, and opened a fresh page in my notebook. Outside, the lilac bush trembled in the wind. I smiled at it, as if greeting an old companion that had grown through every storm with me. It was time to write a letter. Not to anyone in particular. Not to send. Just to say what had never been said. The words that waited patiently at the edge of forgiveness. Dear Max, I don't know where you are today. Maybe you've started over. Maybe you've found peace, as I did. I hope you have. You were once the reason I woke early and worked too long, believing that love meant sacrifice without measure. I used to think a mother's heart had no walls. I was wrong. Without walls, love leaks until it drowns everything it touches. I forgive you, my son. Not because you earned it, but because I refuse to let anger live where peace has finally settled. Forgiveness is not a gift to you. It's the closing of a wound in me. I hope, one day, you'll forgive yourself too. And when you do, remember this. You are more than the worst thing you've done, but only if you choose to be. Your mother, Renate. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into a small box on the shelf. Inside that box were other fragments of my life. The old wedding invitation I never received, the photo of Robert holding Max as a baby, a train ticket to Vienna, a pressed lilac bloom. My past, not as burden, but as evidence that I had lived all of it and still survived. Then I began another letter. This one, to the woman who had carried me through everything, myself. Dear Renate, you spent too long believing strength was measured by how much pain you could endure. It isn't. Strength is the moment you choose peace over approval, self-respect over silence. You have learned to live gently, but not weakly. You have learned that boundaries are not walls, but doors with locks. And you hold the key. You once feared growing old alone. But look at you now, surrounded by friends who found you in your truth, not your usefulness. You are not alone. You are complete. If you ever forget who you are, read this. You are not what they took. You are what you rebuilt. With love, yourself. I laid the second letter beside the first and felt a calm so deep it hummed through me. Outside, a few leaves brushed the window like fingertips. I thought of Robert, of the river, of the courtroom, of the sea. Each chapter closing like a door behind me, soft, deliberate, final. Later, I walked to the library. The children greeted me with their usual chorus of excitement. We read stories about kindness, about courage, about home. I looked at their faces, bright, unguarded, and thought, this is what hope looks like before the world teaches it fear. After the reading, a little girl named Sophie tugged my sleeve. Mrs. Richter, she asked, how do you know when a story is finished? I smiled. When the person in it finally learns to live. She nodded, serious in the way only children can be, and ran off to join the others. That evening, I brewed one last cup of tea and sat on the porch. The street glowed with lamplight, and somewhere far away, a train whistled through the night. I thought of the woman I had been, frightened, giving, lost. And I thought of the woman I had become. The journey between them had been long and merciless and beautiful. I whispered to the dark, not for anyone to hear. I forgive you too, Renate, for not knowing sooner. The stars shimmered faintly above the roofs, and in that moment, everything felt balanced. The past no longer asked for explanations. The future no longer demanded proof. There was only now, a quiet, golden now, enough to fill a lifetime. In the morning, I placed both letters in an envelope and sealed it with wax. On the front, I wrote a single line: "For whoever finds this and needs to know that it's never too late." Then I tucked it into the back of my diary, closed the cover, and smiled. The story was finished. Not because everything was resolved, but because everything finally belonged to her, to me, to Renate Richter, the woman who stopped buying love and started living it. And for the first time, truly, that was enough.